The first time Lincoln told Clyde when he was ready to move back on to his house, the nerdy kid couldn't believe it. He still had his reservations, even as Lincoln had told his dads about his preparedness to leave. When notified the Louds, intentionally the parents were shocked by Lincoln's willingness to return. But this was overwritten by the joy of having their son coming home, that they could be a family again, as best as they could. That is, Rita and Lynn Sr. were still worried for Lincoln's well-being. He hadn't shown any signs that he was truly ready to come home, and feared it was more or less than knee-jerk action their son hadn't thought of it on thoroughly. Interaction with his sisters was still scarce, with the most recent being self-counseling session Lincoln had with Lynn. The last thing anyone wanted was for Lincoln to return home and believe he made the wrong choice, forcing him to leave uncertain amount of time. And like their parents, the girls openly shared their sentiments. "I can't believe Linky is finally coming home," Lenny cheered. "I totes gonna make my best smoothie for him." Her enthusiasm started to wane upon noticing all of her sisters staring at her with indifferent expressions of surprises. Isn't this a good thing? I mean, we wanted him back for so long." In normal circumstances, it would be a call for a celebration, Lisa cheered. Lisa started, glancing back at her father, who was still on the phone talking with Lincoln. But I believe it goes without saying that most of it is troubling, for the lack of better word. Like, what could be so bad about it? Before anyone could answer, Lenny quickly added, "Besides, Linky being scared of us?" "That's just it, Lenny. We don't know what he's thinking right now," Lori clarified. "Last time I talked to him, he looked at me like I simmered down from a loss. I doubt anyone wants to be there if he's coming back just to yell at us," Lynn added. "Did any of you ask Clyde about what he thought of all this?" Luna chimed in. "Maybe bro's getting way over his head coming back." "Nope," Luann replied as she scrolled through her phone. "Didn't even get a text from him." "I still don't think it'll be that bad," Lana started as she petted Hops, who nestled in the front pocket of her overalls. "Maybe Lincoln's coming around to know that we're not going to hurt him again." Lisa sighed. "Lana, you know that's a subjective being at best, given how little interaction we've had him prior from those current events." Lana gave a blank stare. "I don't even know what that means." Lola rolled her eyes. "Of course you wouldn't." The young mechanic threw a glare at her twin. "I bet you don't even know it either." The former pageant goer marched Lana with a heated look of her own. "It means staying focused, genius." Lisa gave a dull stare at the reader. "I'm not in the mood to tell them right now," she muttered to herself. As the twins started bickering over the simple definition, Lucy pursed her lips, as she could be only guess that Lincoln must be thinking. Coming to a place that he deemed extremely dangerous just wasn't in her brother's character. Just ask Lincoln how many times he's been into that haunted house over the years. Being as moody as she was, one would think Lucy would have a better understanding of Lincoln's overall state. However, Lucy would be quick to say that. Not only did that sound offensive, she surely couldn't compare herself to Lincoln. Getting left behind for a trip meant a little of the loo for her physical beatdown. "Lincoln knows he can't avoid us forever," Lucy began, drawing the attention of the others. "Much like how death comes for us eventually. Our brother must feel that he has little choice but to accept his fate, whatever that might be to him." "So you're saying he's just gonna give up?" Lynn asked, unsurprised glance, and it's quite evident as she folded her arms. "He thinks hiding from us is pointless, so she'd take his lumps?" Lucy bit her cheek as she shrugged. "Sounds likely." She squinted her eyes and thought. "But even as it was, we could prove him wrong. Still, what we should do when he comes back. He can't hide in his room all day." Lucy glanced over at their father, who appeared to be wrapping the call up. "We'll have dinner as a family. Besides Mom and Dad, we live on the same floor." "Obviously, we'll totes make him feel like at home again," Lenny spoke, as if it was quite simple. "Well, duh," Lola replied. But Lincoln only approached us once. Wait, twice. He's probably gonna board up his own room every night because he thinks we'll smother him with a pillow while he sleeps. Then get rid of the evidence by burying the body. The girls collectively blinked at the 6-year-old. That's oddly suspicious, Lucy inquired. Lola, you're gonna have to stop watching those old crime movies, Lori advised, although it sounded more like an order. Before anyone could voice their opinion, Lynn Sr. walked in. Well, girls, it's official. Your brother has finally decided it's time to come home. He spoke with enthusiasm before his frown became more apparent. However, given the partridge twiddled his fingers, little condition. Do you girls have an idea to make him feel more comfortable? Aside from literally becoming invisible, Lori spoke dryly. That actually sounds like fun, Lana added happily. I occurred that would be a wise tactic to avoid him getting anxiety problems, Lisa replied. We still don't know his true emotional state, but the possibility of imbalance, I suggest it would be best we evacuate the house the time Lincoln is due to arrive. So what? We go to the mall or whatevs? Luna added. The others gave murmurs of agreement. Normally they spent Sunday doing whatever activity they saw fit, which of course was out of the question due to the lack in spirit. The 9 girls turned to their father. Dad, Lori began, is it all right we could go to the mall tomorrow? Well, sure, Lynn Sr. shrugged. I don't see a problem with that. Just make sure you watch yourselves and Lily. Actually, I think it'd be best if she stays behind, Lisa interjected, gazing up at the ceiling of where she shared her room. It goes without question that Lily is the only sibling Lincoln currently trusts, not to mention that she misses him the most after witnessing the numerous times she cried out for him whenever she was upset. The child genius bowed her head a little, the light reflecting off her glasses in a way that obscured her eyes. She might even be able to act as a consultant that could help Lincoln regain the bond we have broken. Lynn gave a half-idled stare. Lincoln taking advice from a baby? Have you been sleeping well? Lola asked, giving the 4-year-old a quizzical look. Lisa then gave her curt and just glared at them both. I'm sorry, but I don't see you coming up with a plan to actually help her estranged brother, besides avoiding him all day. Lynn raised her hands in defense. Alright, geez. Calm down. I'm only saying Lincoln can't even understand Lily half the time. How do you even know she won't just make him hate us even more? The brunette folded her arms. I know she's pretty talked to us for the past 2 months, and would throw a fit with any of us try to hold her, if she wasn't hungry or to change her diaper. She threw things at me more than once. I think you're forgetting that Lily requested to be moved to our parents' domain during her time our brother was admitted to the hospital, Lisa added. Lynn rolled her eyes. That still doesn't explain why she had it out for me the most. Well, maybe because he had to live in a broken arm for a few more weeks, Lori chimed in, her head resting on a hand that was propped up by her arm. Either way, dudes, Luna cut in, hoping to put off any further arguments. Bro is off table until he opens up to his own, so Lise is likely onto something. What time does Linky get back? Lenny asked. I didn't say, but I'm assuming around before 11, the partridge stated as he eyed the clock. Speaking of which, time for this guy. He pointed his thumbs to his chest. To get started on tonight's din-din. As their father disappeared back into the dining room, the sound of pots and pans were being clattered together, echoing from the kitchen. Lori sat up straight with her hands on her lap. Okay, so we need to be gone by 9:30 or 10. We literally can't have Lincoln seeing us, or he'll probably freak out and want to go back to the McBrides. But what are we gonna make him feel more? Lenny paused, narrowing her eyes. What's the word? Oh, homesick. Luann shook her head. You'll only feel homesick if you've been away from home long enough, Lenny. Ooh, the fantasionist gave a glum reply. However, she perked up as another idea came to mind. What? We could get him a tons of gifts while we're at the mall. Lucy gave her trademark sigh. I guess that's a start, but that's not going to be enough to earn his trust as siblings. Lenny gave an irate down before getting up from her seat. Well, I'm not giving up. She brushed past the rest of her sisters. Linky's getting a homecoming, and he's going to enjoy it. Just where are you going? Lori asked, and a tad irate at Lenny's tone. To make sure his room is clean, duh, came her roommate's reply as she disappeared upstairs. The other girls fidgeted a little at the mention of their brother's room. None of them have been in there since the day Lincoln was taken to the hospital. Just looking at his closed door brought a sense of anguish and grief that would last a couple hours at best. There was a few times where one of the girls would spot Lily trying to make her way inside his room, patting and clawing at the door while giving these long drawn-out whines that would make a cold person's heart melt. And every single time one of them had to try to pry her away from the room, the baby cried out Lincoln's name as best as she could with her limited speech, until she finally tired herself out. The room itself was probably still in the same state Lincoln left it on that fateful day. However, given that his parents delivered the decent amount of his belongings to him, there was a chance that they took the time to clean it themselves. Lenny's determination was starting off by rubbing off on the girls as, one by one, they made their way up to the stairs to help her. Naturally, all of them couldn't fit in their brother's small space without having limited movement. But those couldn't avoid the aid in the cleaning and organizing poked in their heads to check in the process. Lincoln's actions may have been throwing them off their game, but Lenny had a point. They still had to convince him that his other siblings that care for him, especially when the ones remembers how isolated he must feel, being the only other male in the house. Lincoln lightly jabbed the fork into his roast, tearing a piece off before tossing it into his mouth. If there was a dull look in his eyes as he chewed slowly, his mind currently wrapped in a lot of hot debate regarding that phone call he had made only an hour ago. The 11-year-old fidgeted every few moments as the anxiety in his stomach threatened to rise in his chest. Lincoln breathed in order to keep it down, but he felt a swirl as the food he ate, threatening to spoil his appetite. As a McBride residence, dinner was usually quiet with some occasional talk here and there about activities accomplished during the day. However, if there was anything to be said, the lad wasn't paying attention as he focused on his own struggles. Lincoln? Harold asked, breaking Lincoln's train of thought, looking up from his plate. The lad didn't notice that the other McBrides were staring at their own looks of worry. Are you all right? The African-American brought up a hand to his cheek as his tone became fearful. I didn't put too much seasoning in it, did I? Lincoln shook his head. No, the roast is pretty good. It's just... He gulped down another piece before cutting off another slice with his fork. Something's been on my mind. Is it about moving back to your house? Howard asked next. Lincoln only could give a nod, biting his lip when he felt his stomach squirm a little. Ah, don't worry, the Caucasian male spoke with a smile. I know a change of scenery may be difficult, but sometimes it actually would be a good thing. Why, if I had never decided to move out of the city, I would have never met my sweet, sweet Harold, he finished by sending a kind smile to his husband. Aw, Howie, Harold cooed. That's the kind of the problem, Lincoln muttered. How come? Harold started. I thought you'd be happy to be with your family again. Well, maybe with my parents and Lily, but... The lad bit his lip before letting a sigh pass through his nose. I still have to deal with my 9 other sisters. All right, the fear, Harold answered. You still don't trust them yet? No. Lincoln, you're not having second thoughts, are you? Clyde chimed in. Maybe. Lincoln raised a brow. He looked towards his best friend. I mean, I know I need to go back, but I can't help but feeling like... He paused, trying to find the right word. Like, Clyde repeated. Like something bad is going to happen when I get home. Well, I don't know what will happen, but I just get uncomfortable, not knowing anything about my sisters at this point. Lincoln stuck the fork in what remained of the roast, leaned back on his chair. Lynn might be right when she said that they went too far and didn't stop until it was too late. But they were still mad at me for making them fight in the first place. How am I supposed to know they aren't going to be holding that over my head? His lips curled into a deeper frown. My sisters can learn to regret some things, but they can also hold grudges. I remember the past few things Lori or Lola did to each other or anyone else. And it was just over little things, like Lori's phone or Lola's makeup stuff. The Loud's fingers curled in a bit. But when I think about the protocol, he let out a groan. I get reminded of the times they always outnumbered me when it came to making decisions for our weekend trips, or I always had to be the one to help them since when I was available. The boy folded his arms. Sometimes I actually wanted help, but other times I just wanted to chill like Luna may say. Lincoln furrowed his brows a bit. Lori sometimes used me as a footstool, and Lynn would make me as her sparring partner, even though I'm not even interested in sports. And when Lana's always help her feed all of her pets she keeps bringing to the house, on top of breaking stuff we needed, just so Dad can help her fix it. I probably should have known at some point they'd go and make something stupid like that protocol. He threw his hands up in the air as he said, but they didn't even ask me about it. Clyde frowned a bit, few beads of sweat forming on the back of his head. Lincoln, deep breaths. Lincoln had his mouth open as he was about to say something else, only to close it before muttering, "Sorry." He took another deep breath and exhaled slowly. I just feel like my mind is all over the place. The boy placed his hands on his head, leaned over to the table. Sometimes I feel mad whenever I think about being back home tomorrow. Lincoln let out a low groan as he felt his stomach swirl a bit. The only thing separating from me and my other sisters is my own door, and they've always barged in my room whenever they feel like it. I can't even ignore them because that'll just make them mad. Trust me, I've tried. His eyes twitched as a knot formed in his gut, or at least what he hoped was one. But, however, for Lana sometimes stuck into my room whenever she had a nightmare, and my room isn't big enough all the time for 9 of them to fit all in. He felt his stomach beginning to throb a bit, making him a little nauseous. Lincoln gave a hard gulp when he felt something enter the lower of his throat, which appeared to stay him for the moment. What if one night they break into my room and... Lincoln lurched upwards as his stomach made a loud gurgling sound. A sudden weight of it known on his chest felt his dinner coming up. His cheeks puffed out before he clamped his hand over his mouth. The Loud immediately jumped to his seat before bolting to the bathroom. The two fathers simultaneously gasped, with Clyde wincing and gagging noises could be heard from the bathroom. "Oh dear," Howard started as he turned to his family. "This is exactly like the time we discovered Clyde had a fear of heights." "Should I get the soup and relaxing music ready?" Harold asked his husband. "Actually, Dads," Clyde cut in, "I'll go and help him." The boy eased back on his chair and stood up. "I've been down this road many times," was his reply when strolled past the adults. Poking his head at the Oval Office, the African-American was greeted to what he expected, Lincoln being face deep into the bowl as he spewed out another torrent of puke. The Loud groaned as he lifted his head, small traces of partially digested food covering the edges of his lips. Clyde patted Lincoln to his back. "You all right, buddy?" The Loud burped for a second before thrusting his head back into the bowl, gagging as his stomach bile spewed from his mouth. "Ugh!" He coughed a few more times before standing up. "What just happened?" Clyde tore off a few sips of toilet paper before handing them to Lincoln. "You just had what my dad's had called a panic throw-up." Lincoln lightly grabbed the paper and wiped his mouth. "A what?" "It's when you puke when you're going into a panic," the nerdy kid explained, as Lincoln shakily stood up, tossed the paper into the trash. "I had a few of these growing up, usually while eating something." Lincoln made a small hum in understanding before turning on the faucet, ducking his head under the opening and let his tongue become drenched in clean water. "This is your first time getting once?" Lincoln then swished some water in his mouth before spitting it out. "I guess I haven't had the need to throw up before." He cringed a little as the taste of the small traces of bile was on his teeth. "This isn't going to be a constant thing, is it?" Clyde shook his head. "Nah, it usually happens once. Besides, I'm pretty sure your sisters won't try and kill you in your sleep." "But how would you know that? You've only been to my house a few times." Lincoln folded his arms as he leaned into the sink. You haven't had to live with them. True, but that's because Clyde stopped himself mid-sentence as he almost lost some crucial information. Lincoln raised a brow. Clyde? Thinking over Bobby's words, Clyde felt the uneasiness grow. He didn't want to lie to Lincoln, especially considering how sensitive he was now that the Loud was all nearly focused on his sisters. Plus, now that he thought about it, it would happen when Lincoln goes back tomorrow. Bobby did say it could be worse if Lincoln found out on his own. Therefore, possibly re-announcing his friendship with Clyde because the McBride was lying to him the whole time. And who is to say if one of his sisters would tell him? Granted, Lincoln may not possibly have with them, but this could make him question whatever his friends were really trying to keep him safe. God forbid that Lincoln automatically assumed his sisters had secretly tricked his friends into spying him so they could snatch him up later, or... Clyde, Lincoln spoke again, snapping his fingers in front of the boy's glasses. Clyde then shook his head and focused on Lincoln. Huh? You were spacing out. So what were you saying? The McBride frowned, directing his gaze into the floor as guilt pooled into his chest. As his best friend, Lincoln deserved to know the truth. Better than him than anyone else, like Bobby said. Lincoln, I have a confession to make. About what? Clyde clasped his hands behind him. You know that strategy we used to keep from seeing your sisters at school? Lincoln growing more confused. Yeah, what about it? It's working out great so far. Well, that's the thing. It wouldn't have worked out so well if we, myself and our friends... Clyde gulped as sweat started to drip and form from his forehead. Taking a deep breath. It wouldn't have worked if we weren't in touch with your sisters. Clyde finally let out one breath. He breathed in deeply before biting his lips together. Staring with the pupils at Lincoln, awaited his response. Lincoln began, scratching his head. Can you repeat that? I got lost after the first few words. Clyde let out an exasperated sigh, his body slouching a little as he regained his composure. In order to keep you from being scared, we had to figure out where your sisters go every day at school, and the only way we could do that was to exchange phone numbers. Lincoln gave Clyde a neutral stare. The latter was waiting for the former to blow up at him. Instead, these tense silence filled the void. It was cut off occasionally by the sounds of pots and pans running from the kitchen. Becoming more unnerved by the lack of action, Clyde continued. Now, before you get mad, it was Lynn and Ronnie Ann's idea. We hoped that everyone's location being known, your sisters could avoid you while we made sure that you didn't go to certain parts of the school. Oh, Lincoln replied, giving a sheepish smile. Wow, that took Clyde by surprise. I already figured that out. Clyde's eyes became wide as lenses. But how? The Loud lifted a finger as he turned to rinse his mouth out again. Lincoln gave a sigh, and he turned the faucet off, feeling a bit more satisfied after cleansing his teeth a bit. Sorry, I had some of that stuff in my mouth. He cleared his throat. After I woke up from my nap, I had to use the bathroom for a sec, and then... Shaking his hands dry, Lincoln stepped out of the bathroom, feeling a bit refreshed from his nap as he felt it cleared down the hall next towards the living room. The Loud heard Clyde's voice, as well as an order to masculine tone that I couldn't quite make out. Lifting a brow, Lincoln decided to state his curiosity and investigate. The exact moment, though, he also heard loud buzzing echoing from his friend's bedroom. Looking up at the doorway, the Loud saw the phone shaking on top of the nightstand. Apparently, its vibration was setting off as strong enough to make it shuffle across the wooden surface. Lincoln looked back down at the hall, glanced up to the phone, which vibrated once more, giving a shrug. I'll just hand him his phone. Walking 10 steps, the 11-year-old reached for the phone, only to stop just inches above the device once he caught the name of the person who sent him the recent message shown on the screen. What the? Lynn? Lincoln spoke in a whispered tone. Looking back at the hall, he could hear Clyde talking, and it didn't seem like his voice was drawing closer. Focusing on the phone once more, the white-haired Loud picked it up and opened the message app. To his surprise, the text originated from a group chat that had names that we're very much familiar with. Fumbling with the top of the message, the group had their current date listed. Lincoln slowly thumbed down, his eyes scanning each message with a sinking feeling developed in his chest. How did the meeting go? Liam. Well, Lincoln's pissed, so there's that. Lynn. What happened? Rusty. Spilled the beans on that protocol. At least he was willing to listen this time. Lynn. Well, it was a dumb idea anyway. R.A. Lincoln then bit his lip after he read the first message first. He didn't expect his best friend to be talking with his sisters or working with them. He didn't know. But Ronnie Ann, the girl who had quote-unquote beat Lynn to the floor, how long were they keeping this a secret? Don't push it. Lola. Just how many of these sisters are in here? Lincoln muttered as he kept reading. So what's next? Zach. Don't know. Guess we'll keep doing what we did normally and keep Lincoln from seeing us. Lynn. Seeing us? The loud repeated. Does that mean me or them? He squinted his eyes a little bit as he kept reading. Oh, and I managed to try to get him to talk to Luann. Lynn. Still not looking forward to it. Luann. Luann, we're going to have to face his wrath eventually. At least you have a chance of getting out of the way first. Lucy. And what's supposed to have made me feel better? Luann. Maybe. Why are we texting each other when we're all in the same house? Lana. Because it's rude not to, so there. Lola. Lincoln shook his head. That makes much sense as Lori is texting Bobby every few minutes. So does that mean he's losing his fear, y'all know? Liam. Doubt it. He's coming to us one at a time, which is good, but we don't know how he'll act around one more sister. Plus, minus Lily. 'Cause, Lynn. How long is this gonna keep up? It's been nearly a few months now. Rusty. Dude, it's only been like 3 weeks. Zach. We just can't force Lincoln to feel better, If he's starting to talk to his sisters again, at least he's getting somewhere. I'd much rather see him old dorky self than a guy who's afraid of being alone. R.A. Lincoln gave a sad look on the screen, recalling how often his friends tried to spend more time with him than usual at school because of his fearful state. He lost interest in his current conversation, scrolling up to find out when the group chat first started. The top of the screen showed all the contacts listed above the chat in regards to his sisters. Lincoln was surprised that it only contained the ones who went to his school. That makes sense. I wouldn't expect Luna, Lenny, or Lori there, and Lisa teaches at college. He continued to scroll up, idly looking at the conversations for the past week. Finally, Lincoln reached the top of the page, seeing the start date was only a couple of days after he started school again. The Loud even found out the argument took place that same day when he bumped into Luann at that school assembly. So this is going on for a while. Lincoln spoke absentmindedly, only to jerk his head towards the hallway when he heard laughter. When the noise died down, and thankfully not hearing any footsteps, he turned his attention back to the phone. Taking the time to read through several messages, Lincoln became more disheartened of how worried his friends were for his mental health, as well as his sisters asking about his well-being. Guess Lynn was telling the truth, he spoke solemnly, reflecting on his statements the sporty girl made before their session ended. After a few more minutes of browsing through texts, Lincoln exited out of the message app and set the phone back on the nightstand. Honestly, he wouldn't expected to stumble upon a secret as big as this. A part of him felt betrayed. A part of him felt as if he was being set up, and what his friends would hide from him, or at least getting the assumption that Lincoln would be okay with it. How long did they plan on keeping this a secret? Were they even going to tell him at all? Judging by the dates on Clyde's phone, Lincoln assumed the answer was never. He could have possibly expected Rusty or Zach to come up with something like this, but Clyde and Ronnie Ann were definitely like the least people to likely work with his sisters, especially the latter. He had found the conversation between Clyde and Ronnie Ann where it was starting to get some answers from his sisters, as well as implying that she'd resort to her fists if they didn't give what she wanted. Definitely sounded something she'd do, and the former bully still had a missing tooth from that fight in the lunchroom. Although, Lincoln furrowed his brows and he remembered the date in which the group chat started. It was the same day Ronnie Ann told Clyde she was going after his sisters. Albeit late at night, something must have happened that made Ronnie Ann change her tune, and the Loud felt a little bit fidgety as he thought of the worst possible scenario. Did she try to confront his sisters and they just beat her to the dirt? Was that all just being done because his sisters forced his friends to do their bidding? Lincoln shook his head. No, that couldn't have been the case. Ronnie Ann looked fine just that morning, aside from a band-aid on her forehead. Picking the phone back up, Lincoln opened the group chat again, scrolled to the very top. The Loud hummed and thought as he saw his friends had the same assumption about Ronnie Ann being strong-armed into helping his sisters. He did snort a little at Ronnie Ann's threat to Rusty and Zach. What stood out to him, though, was a few short lines that expresses their concern about losing Lincoln's trust, and would he discover the secret operation? Were they running? However, Lincoln didn't have time to dwell on that, as he shifted the scroll up to reveal a picture that Lucy had posted. Lincoln raised a brow and scanned it. It didn't look half bad, but it looked paled comparison to the stuff he drew recently. He was able to make it out, though. His Gothic sister drew a picture of herself and himself, with her arms wrapped around his legs as if she was pleading to him to do something about it. Unfortunately, the Lincoln in this picture looked pathetic, judging by the blank stare Lucy drew of him. It would have given that his sister's way of drawing, but it felt like there was more to it than what he could see. In particular, he also noticed that the paper she drew looked as if it got a few water drops on it. Lincoln's heart puffed out as he took a deep breath, exhaling through his nose, and set Clyde's phone back down the same way he found it. Looking into the hall, it was clear that the noise of whoever Clyde was talking to had died down a little. Lincoln walked back to his room, his mind abuzz with the whole info he found. He didn't try to sit down as he felt there was too much energy coursing through him. He placed his hands down the back of him. Part of him felt a little bit miffed about the whole effect that his friends were keeping from him for so long, but he couldn't be angry at them for it. Everyone was well aware of the risk when they were forming this strategy. It was apparent that Lincoln's social circle was hesitant to have anything to do with his sisters. Lincoln bit his cheek. All of them were brave enough to put aside their differences just to keep Lincoln's fears at bay. And all Lincoln had to show for it was the constant worry that might have not been there. Well, not entirely. Outside Ronnie Ann, none of his sisters were fighters. Even so, they could barely work to find common ground for his sake, and that was there to stop Lincoln from doing the same. After all the bodyguarding they have done for him, the Loud was beginning to feel like he had been more of a burden than anything. A perfect example was Ronnie Ann's comment about Lincoln being too scared to be by himself. But maybe he could change that. Lincoln furrowed his brows as he stopped pacing. After that session with Lynn, he became comfortably say that he didn't fear his sisters as much as he used to. Being angry at their stupidity helped, but there was still a grave amount of mistrust though. As long as Lincoln knew the 10-headed beast, he's counting the world of his sisters, was very iffy. They wouldn't do anything unless they got something out of it. Worst case being that they lied about helping. What time they got banned from that store certainly came to mind. Sometimes they didn't follow his own advice, which is questionable at best. Just ask Lincoln about the first time he first told them that he had a bully just so to be a girl. Sure, they were right about Ronnie Ann, but that didn't mean their advice was sound. Not to mention the numerous times they supposedly learned a lesson, but they would later show that they would forgot about it. Guess they would forget about the fact that Lincoln would occasionally dress up in his favorite comic book hero. Wait! Lincoln shook his own head, as to be stopped by his internal ranting. Was his being carried away for a sec? Although he glanced up at the ceiling, I don't think Lily would do something like that on her own, and she has a bit of habit of copying all of us. But she's just a baby. Plus the only thing she wouldn't do is beat me up. The middle child of one of the Louds stopped as one unnerving situation came to mind. Because she copies everyone. His eyes widened. What if they managed to brainwash Lily into thinking it was my fault? He curled his hands into fists and the glare took shape. Well, two could play that game. He pointed a finger in the air. I can easily show Lily just how much of a good brother I literally am. His finger curled down and replaced with a growing anger. But I have to be at home with everyone else. He shivered slightly. To do that, putting his hand to his head, I think I need to sit down for a second.